Good morning, boys, girls, and goobers. On today's news, I'm going to tell you all about WWE's special plans for Roman Reigns at Royal Rumble 2021.
Plus an insight into how AEW's creative process works.
Got a backstage update on Braun Strowman's WWE injury status.
And a genius idea that Sami Zayn came up with that WWE obviously nixed. This is the news.
Let's kick things off by talking Roman Reigns at Royal Rumble 2021. What is the big dog going to be doing at the first Big Four pay-per-view of the year? Well, we know he's got Kevin Owens coming up, presumably at TLC 2021. No, that'll be next year. I'm getting my years all in a kerfuffle. Believe it or not,
2020 already.
There we go. Yeah, just shut the whole bloody thing down. But that feud started off on this week's episode of SmackDown. Great series of angles. I'm immediately fired up for that feud, and I know a lot of people are as well. But don't expect the Kevin Owens feud to continue until Royal Rumble 2021, because according to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, Daniel Bryan has been pinpointed as Roman's opponent for that pay-per-view. That's WWE's current plan. We know it's WWE. We know they like to change plans at the last minute. We know what Vince McMahon is like. However, that is currently what is penciled in for that big event. Now, Roman and Daniel Bryan they've kind of got a beef already, right? Because Jey Uso destroyed Daniel Bryan the other week to kind of prove himself to the tribal chief, the head of the table, whatever you want to, or the dinner lady, I don't know, whatever the hell you want to call Roman Reigns at this moment. But it'll be the first time that those two have actually faced off one-on-one on pay-per-view since Fastlane 2015. That, by the time this comes around, will be almost 6 years, which is quite remarkable when you're considering, you know, kind of how rematch heavy WWE can often be. But it looks like this feud will be coming together. Meltzer also notes that WWE originally wanted to do Reigns versus Bryan back during the Planet's Champion era. But unfortunately, Roman, of course, his, leukemia came back, and terribly worrying times there. He was removed from television just before Daniel Bryan won the belt. Had to nix all of those plans. But I think this would be a really cool match nonetheless. It's something I'd be really excited for. This is perhaps the best version of Roman Reigns we've ever had. And Daniel Bryan's Daniel Bryan. The guy is always phenomenal. So, yeah, count me all in for this match and feud, brother. I'm sure it will be exquisite. Andy
Murray, is this good booking I'm seeing before me? Yeah, fully on board with this. Like you say, I think the idea of having him face Kevin Owens next, especially a sort of a plunder show like TLC, is great. Love what they did with that on SmackDown, despite the fact they described it as a mess over the weekend. Which, yeah, I mean, elements of it, you were just like, hey, you've just sort of thrown this together at the last minute, haven't you? But still, Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns is great for a big TLC match. We've got more developments on TLC to come, as Andy alluded to. And, yeah, Daniel Bryan at the Rumble, perfect. Like, the road to WrestleMania is almost really easy to do for someone like Roman Reigns. Like you say, you have TLC, Kevin Owens, you have Daniel Bryan at the Royal Rumble. You probably have Roman with both of those two guys, Jey Uso. It's my elimination chamber, so I'm going to chuck Chad Gable in there because he's mint, and someone else. And then you just hoy all that together, do some shenanigans in there. Roman Reigns escapes as champion, but can he hold on to his title? Surprise! Big E's here! He's coming for me at WrestleMania! Like, they have to actually try hard to screw this up, which they probably will, but I love what they're doing with on the blue side of things with the Universal Championship, Andy.
Yeah, it's a really well-booked belt at the moment, and you haven't always been able to say that throughout the belt's lifespan. So it's great stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
And like you say, astonishing it's taken them this long to redo Reigns and Bryan, but it's understandable. And I'm kind of glad that they didn't go down with the whole Planet's Champion stuff, because I think this dynamic works a lot better. But we'll get back to WWE Championship matches in a few minutes. Before that, let's talk about AEW's creative process, because Chris Jericho popped on Conan's Keeping It 100 podcast, one of the best podcasts out there that isn't ours, to talk about AEW's creative process, particularly when it comes to piecing shows together, and explain how crucial QT Marshall is to the whole process, compiling the week's ideas, formatting them, and then presenting them to company president Tony Khan. Jericho said Tony will say it's about the opening quarter, the crossover quarter, and the final quarter. So I think Tony decides where he wants that, and QT shakes up the rest. Tony then says this is good, or we need a package here. So it's a weekly kind of collaborative process for sure. He also continued in that conversation to talk about how proud they are of not having a team of writers. And look, I know there's going to be people already in the comment section here, Andy, saying, oh, we're biased towards AEW, or, you know, not everything that AEW does is perfect. And I think that's a fair assessment. You know, there are some duds on Dynamite. You know, there are some issues with the weekly TV product they come out with. But you can't sit there as a WWE fan who rolls their eyes week in, week out with Monday Night Raw and go, yeah, there's probably elements of that WWE should take on board, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like a throwback to the way wrestling used to be. Wrestling didn't used to be written by, you know, an army of 20 to 30 writers who aren't necessarily all that experienced in professional wrestling until this kind of monopolized era of WWE kicked in. This is a very WWE practice, having that massive writing room. So, you know, empowering the wrestlers, asking them to come up with ideas and so forth, having a minimal crew. It goes back to the sport's, you know, kind of creative roots in a way. With regards to QT Marshall, it sounds to me like the guy is genuinely one of the most important people in the AEW system at the moment. And not only is he on TV as part of the Natural Nightmares, he's providing this role, he's a producer, and he's also one of the lead trainers at the Nightmare Factory Wrestling School. And, you know, his own wrestling school has helped produce people like Anna Jay, and a bunch of other of the women's wrestlers in AEW have come through that system as well. So, you know, he's an important cog in this machine, very much so. Might not be the flashiest guy on screen, but behind the scenes, seems to me that QT Marshall is pretty vital.
Yeah, exactly. In conclusion, I suppose, Andy, when it comes to WWE's writing process, you could say too many cooks spoil the broth.
Okay, Braun. Let's go with Braun, because I'm about to talk about Braun Strowman. Hey, there we go. Got a little update on Braun Strowman's injury status. So it was reported over the weekend that the reason behind Braun Strowman's suspension on WWE television was because he might have picked up an injury at Survivor Series. I'm here to tell you today via Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer that he has indeed picked up a knee injury. Dave confirmed this properly just yesterday, stating that Strowman hurt his knee at Survivor Series. He is now currently off the card for TLC 2020. He had been pegged for that pay-per-view as a potential opponent for Drew McIntyre. That will obviously now be off the table, and it looks very much like whoever wins the triple threat on tonight's episode of Raw, Riddle, AJ Styles, or Keith Lee, whoever wins that match, will probably face Drew at the pay-per-view. WWE had actually been discussing ideas to maybe throw Braun into that triple threat and make it a four-way and have him compete for the title anyway. That seems to be off the table. No Braun for a little while. No word on how severe the injury is, but here's hoping for a swift recovery.
Yeah, I feel a bit bad about this one because I'm kind of glad that he's not going to be involved in TLC. It would have felt really backwards to have Braun Strowman just sort of hoid in at the last minute and, like you say, ruin what has been a nice little development off the back of Survivor Series with them pitching a shutout and being rewarded, etc., etc. So yeah, I'm, you know, obviously we wish him well in his recovery. I'm fine with not having Braun Strowman on my screen for a while. I think I need to miss him for a bit. And, you know, that makes tonight's triple threat so much more interesting. And I genuinely can't call it, especially because you would assume whoever Drew faces is probably going to lose at TLC. You kind of expect that Drew is going to head into the Royal Rumble, considering the legacy of this year's. Timing again, struggling with that. Yeah, considering all that, you think that he has to retain. So maybe AJ has to win, but then I don't want to ruin the whole AJ Big Jawed combination yet. So maybe Riddle? I don't know. But I'm looking forward to Monday Night Raw a whole lot more off the back of that story. And obviously get well soon at Braun Strowman. Hopefully he recovers from that knee injury. We reported this on Friday. Just talked about, yeah, it must be bloody hard being Braun Strowman's knees. So get well soon, and hopefully we can have a big moment with him potentially returning, I don't know, let's just say at the Royal Rumble. And let's conclude today with a final story about Sami Zayn and Liv Morgan, that new Live Forever program is on the WWE Network. Hearing great reports because of it. I've not seen it yet. General consensus appears to be, yeah, really good, talking about Liv Morgan, and yet again, a severe indictment of WWE's creative process. And Sami Zayn, off the back of people getting so excited about Live Forever, tweeted about the fact he actually pitched that when he was first starting his whole Great Liberator gimmick, he was going to have Liv Morgan join his heel stable. And then WWE said, nah, don't really want to do that. Let's move her to Raw as part of the draft. And then they, well, did nothing with her. They sort of started and stopped the Riot Squad. And I don't know what they're doing with Liv Morgan as of right now, if I'm perfectly honest. And I just think that's a real missed opportunity, because the whole Sami Zayn thing with Cesaro and Shinsuke and this gimmick he's got right now, and I've got a question actually in our Twitter questions that leads on from this, but yeah, I thought that could have really been improved by a female presence, and especially someone like Liv Morgan, who's got so much potential, Andy.
Yeah, it's an interesting pairing, I think, Sami and Liv Morgan, and it's one that you don't necessarily look at and go, oh yeah, they would have great chemistry, that'd be amazing. But Sami Zayn makes everything work. He's tremendous. He's just such a tremendously versatile and entertaining televised performer. And Liv Morgan has worked ridiculously hard over the past few years to kind of hone her craft and improve as a performer and everything else. And, you know, I think it would take off. I really do. You know, Sami's tremendous. Liv is improving at a ridiculous rate to the point where I think in like 2 or 3 years, she's going to be one of, if not the key person in the whole division. It's kind of a shame that didn't come to fruition, but here's hoping that Liv gets a renewed focus on the back of this Live Forever special, which I've heard, not watched it yet, but I've heard is tremendous.
Yeah, that's, I think, watching for this week, definitely, Andy. Let's move on to our Twitter questions at WhatCulture WWE, because it sort of follows on from that. First question today comes from Mark Solid, who sends us a picture of Thumper and Triton laying by the tree. First of all, good dogs, and nice to see you put your Christmas decorations up before December. Don't let people who slag you up and say, you have to wait till December, as Andy tweeted over the weekend. Don't let them tell you what to do. You do what you bloody like.
You do you.
Especially this year, Andy.
Yeah,
God,
exactly.
we need it.
Exactly.
Anyway, Mark says, morning guys, hope you had a great weekend. Thoughts on Sami Zayn forming a stable to become the longest reigning IC champion in history? Can even bring in some NXT stars. I really like the idea, not necessarily even about a stable, just have Sami Zayn hold the IC title for bloody ages, at least a year.
Yeah, I'd be on board with that. I mean, the longest reign ever is the Honky Tonk Man at 400 plus days. Sami Zayn is currently 64 days into his second recognised reign. So basically you're talking about Sami Zayn holding the Intercontinental title non-stop until this time next year. I'd be totally on board with that. I like long title reigns. The situation sometimes calls for short title reigns and hot shotting, but I'd really love to see Sami just being a prick with this thing for a year, because he's one of the best pricks in the game at playing his character. Amazing considering he's such a good dude off the screen by all accounts and so forth. So yeah, I'd like to see that a lot. I don't know, speaking of stables, why did they split the Artist Collective in the first place? Like, that was really good for Cesaro and Nakamura as well, and what have they done since then? So yes, I'd be well up for this. Yeah,
exactly. I just, like, those sort of dates would presumably take us quite close to WrestleMania 38. My maths is all over the place with that sort of thing. But yeah, so there's that. And I just think the amount of times that in the last, say, decade, I've sat here and gone, who is United States champion and Intercontinental champion? If I had a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you. It'd be nice to just have like, it's a nice long reign. I think the last long reign I was just looking before we started was like Shinsuke Nakamura, which is like 200 days.
Yeah.
Aside from that, it's all been, a few months reign, but nothing really significant and not with a great deal of fanfare. Whereas him just shenanigan his way out of title shots all the bloody time would be really good. Anyway, second question today comes from Mad Pancakes on Twitter. It says, as the Royal Rumble is set to be something big, could you see The Fiend either beating Orton or winning the Rumble, and Alexa Bliss winning the Raw Women's title? This would put a huge spotlight on the duo and would give WWE a huge start for 2021.
That's a tough question, because looking at where The Fiend falls in the landscape at the moment, it's kind of difficult for me to picture him in one of these main level title scenes. I think that Drew versus The Fiend for WrestleMania is very possible. Not necessarily the direction I would go with if I had the pencil, but it's something that I could definitely see them doing. Alexa Bliss versus, potentially Asuka going into WrestleMania, again, is something I could see them doing, but I think that the Fiend's recent dalliances with top-level world titles have not been great. So I think we need to be very, very careful from a writing standpoint if they're going to do that, because, oh, Jesus, that Fiend Universal title reign wasn't good. So
no.
The first one or the second one. So let's just see where they go. I get hate all the time when I criticize the Fiend, but man, just calling it like I see it.
I like the idea. I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
I think someone like Rhea Ripley has to win the Women's Royal Rumble. You need a feel-good winner who is fairly obvious, but also someone who, you know, probably will need a bit of rehabilitation as much as, you know, she's involved in... Thank you, William Regal, for that one. I think that's the way you're going to go with that. And the men's side of things, I don't see it being the Fiend, to be perfectly honest, winning the Rumble. It just seems like, it's a weird thing to merge him with the Royal Rumble match stipulation, the Fiend. But who knows? Let's be perfectly honest. You could have the 3 faces of Wyatt, I suppose. Yeah, who knows? Final question today comes from Adam Smith, who says, ahoy, hashtag pasty pirates. First of all, love that. Keep calling us that and start asking us questions with the word ahoy. Adam says, great name by the way, I've long disliked WWE using stipulations as pay-per-view titles like Hell in a Cell or TLC, as it forces feuds to squeeze into often ill-fitting match types. Is the exception to this, and would you prefer a return to standalone pay-per-view names? Andy, would you like to see Armageddon back?
Yeah, I don't think War Games is the exception to it at all. It just so happens that this feud that, you know, comes around every single year, we need to have 4-on-4 people. I think it's the exact same as Hell in a Cell and TLC every year. I will say that this year's build for the men's match in particular has been a lot better and a lot less forced than usual, but it's the exact same thing. Yes, I totally agree with you. I think that I would love to see a return to No Way Out in Armageddon and fully loaded and roadblock end of the great balls of, maybe not those last two, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I think that things like Hell in a Cell should happen when a blood feud warrants it, not just because it's a date on a calendar.
Quite right there. Spot on. Not a lot I can really add to that. Let's move on to today's, and finally, and this is a comment sure to boil some piss in the comments and start a real argument, so I thought I'd mention it today. Shout out to Lance Storm, just a legend, and I'd like to think friend of the channel. I don't know if we're 100% certain, but sure. I'd like to think so. Anyway, Lance tweeted over the weekend, I've concluded today that AEW is like pineapple on a pizza. Those who don't like it actually get mad at people who do and try to convince them to stop enjoying something they like. That might be a really good analogy for AEW. What do you reckon, Andy?
Yeah, I think it is, man. Tribalism is the blight of modern wrestling fandom, and I think the pineapple on pizza analogy really nails it. Good stuff.
Although, the argument is also there that the polar opposite is true, that people really like AEW and everyone goes, I don't really like AEW, then people pile on them. Let us know in the comments, what do you reckon? And I'm sure that's going to start a flame war. Okay, let us know your thoughts on that and all of today's news stories in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Myself and the Daddy Boy sitting down to preview the Monday Night Raw, and hopefully, fingers crossed, can't say a lot else, but hopefully a major interview in the next few days for you to listen to on there with a huge star of AEW. That's all I'm allowed to say right now. But anyway, let us know your thoughts on Twitter and your Twitter questions at WhatCultureWWE. Well, actually, they can follow both of us. You can follow Andy Murray at Andy
H. Murray. The H today stands for Happy Birthday Christian. Remember when he came back and Todd Grisham went, it's Christian. Jesus Christ. I could have mentioned one of his career's great moments. Why did I go to that? I'm sorry, Christian. I really like you.
My mind goes to that as well. I love Christian, legend. Although he would have looked better with a blue dot on his face. Follow me on Twitter at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all at WhatCulture WWE. But for now, my thanks to Andy Murray. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.